Monte Carlo, talk to me a little bit about it.
Okay, so Monte Carlo, another map where it's this beautiful, opulent, the wealthy in the Overwatch universe go here to play, you know? Flying yachts, casinos, luxury hotels, AI F1 races. We're another map. We're having a lot of fun just applying this Overwatch aesthetic to the world and this universe in Monte Carlo or Monaco. So, and this also has a nice story connection to the overall story of Overwatch 2. So look out for that as we share more later. But
Yeah, it's just gorgeous. I mean, and the one thing that strikes me about this map, and I think you guys can obviously speak to the best, is that each point and area of the map plays so drastically different. Once we'll actually see it in play, but is that something that you guys are looking at with map design, of just like how you guys can change like verticality, levels of terrain, really, empower certain heroes or certain roles to really kind of take advantage of that?
We're definitely doing that.
mhm.
And I think a lot of the Overwatch 2 maps have features in them that we haven't built before. Everyone just got to look at Rome, and we have that sort of like switchback section in it, or like the loop section, and that was something we tried 3 or 4 times over the entire course of Overwatch development, and we're just never able to get it to work right. And on Rome, we feel like we finally cracked the code on something like that. In Monte Carlo, there is this really cool uphill section in the map, and it's steeper and longer than anything we've done before, and so there's a lot of like difference in elevation there, and I feel like it kind of just speaks to some of the changes that we're willing to make with this game in order to introduce new gameplay and to have it feel fresh and vibrant for players.
Yeah, I definitely think we can start off that final map. We can keep this discussion going, because that was one of the first things that I noticed about this map. I was like, oh, like we're going straight. I was like, oh, this feels like, very like, classic Overwatch. Like here's the choke, and then all of a sudden we're going up. And I was like, I can't remember a map. Maybe even I think people when they see it probably would compare to like Eichenwald when you're kind of going around the castle, but it's even steeper than that. Like I remember you're looking at it and you're like, oh man, how were they getting up there? Like it's such a cool dynamic though.
Yeah, definitely. And Eichenwald's a great example of it, but of rising through a map. But this one doesn't have a large structure in the middle of it, so you're going up this really big elevation and it's all open, and so there's a lot more interplay between the two teams as they're trying to push up the hill.
And I love the spawn rooms with the cars and everything. It's just so cool. As you just kind of see both of these teams come out of the spawn. Just a lot of detail. I love leaning into the F1 when you have like the kind of car going around the track. Even the checkpoints is being kind of like your kind of checkpoint how they would be in like a race. You see this. So this first point is really interesting. I think for a lot of people is where we'll see Zarya on defense. It's like a solo tank. Like you can play so many different ways, right? I've seen people play like really close up by like some of these staircases, a little bit further back. You can play the snipers up on the bridge. You can play like soldier up on the bridge. I think just adds so much more dynamics to play.
Yeah,
and you
definitely.
can see the payload is another. We're having fun with the payload here. It's a AI-driven F1 car race. So.
And creating the escort maps, how does that different from some of the other things you guys are working on, like push, hybrids, controls? Like is there a different type of philosophy when going in to start like a map for escort versus some of those other modes?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences between these types of modes, and when you do map design on Overwatch, like one of the things you always have to think about is where the spawn rooms are going to be and how you're going to get out of the spawn rooms. And obviously it's different. Coming out of a spawn room is different on a payload map than any of our other map types, because you immediately start interacting with the objective. one of the toughest things about developing payload maps for Overwatch is the entire route needs to be like a certain minimum width, just to be able to get the payload to fit through it. And usually you want to have enough space on the sides of it so that you can move around. We do have a few tight sections in our maps, but they're very short. Like right after you get the payload in King's Row, it gets very tight, but that's for a short period of time. And so when you do start making these wider areas, it becomes very difficult to control sight lines, and it gets easy to make very long sight lines through the map where it no longer really feels like an Overwatch map anymore, because we really try to control those things. And I think it's why you see that a lot of the payload maps, they do weave back and forth a lot, and so much of that is about controlling sight lines and then also presenting like difficult areas for a team to push through. Oh, this is the hilly section.
Yeah, so I was going to say that's the area of verticality where, like, there's a sniper perch up here. It's kind of like that, right hand side if we're looking at it. But yeah, just this poses so many different obstacles for teams. But I also think it's kind of presents multiple ways to play where. You see right now, both teams playing the Zarya, but like you could play really fast and kind of dive up onto the high ground. Like you could play really slow, kind of work your way around. It's this team is just actually kind of just rolling on through. Zarya seems to be the tank choice of the day.
Yeah,
And you
like I
can
said,
see,
that change is pretty new.
you can see from a visual standpoint that when making a payload map, they're pretty large maps for an Overwatch space. So we want the visuals to kind of change as players complete objectives. The world looks different to them. You know, it was flat before, and then you reach the first objective, and now you're on the hill. And they'll move into the hotel for the final objective. So there's this visual progression to kind of your completing objectives. And you feel like you're making progress through the map because the world around you is somewhat changing as it goes along.
Yeah, kind of like Dorado almost. Like
Right.
if you were to kind of think of a map from the live game where you kind of start through that choke area, it goes towards that high ground, and then you have that like interior. And the interior for this map is one of the cooler things that I've seen in Overwatch, and hopefully we'll get to see it. But just the tiering of it. How did that come about? With when we can go inside, we'll obviously have a better view of it, but it's really kind of like this multi-tiered vertical kind of like casino. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a super cool space and really fun to fight through. I think over time, Overwatch map design has changed a little bit, just the way that the game has changed a little bit. The presence or the importance of high ground really can't be understated in this game, and so we're trying to give more of that to teams, and trying to create kind of like conflict points in some of these maps, and who's going to control that high ground. Yeah,
no, I think obviously as a shooter, right, their high ground is always kind of the go-to, where Overwatch has always had the ability for multiple players to take high ground, whether it's like a Hanzo, like we just saw there, like with the wall climb, or a Widow. But yeah, with like a multi-tiered level like this, it allows everybody to kind of have some access of high ground, which brings into play, I know, Ana really kind of effective here at the high ground with the grenades as we see the payload kind of go over the line, and the car will go inside of the casino. I've seen a few cars inside of casinos in my day. They're usually not moving though. I think depending on how the day went, maybe they're moving, but that's just from my point of view.
This is the hotel portion of the casino, the luxury casino.
Yeah, and you can see the high ground in the back over there. It's actually really difficult for us to put a lot of it into our game. One of the things we do in Overwatch is our stairs are very shallow. And we don't typically have any steep ramps in the entire game. And I think the game plays better that way. It feels smoother like that. But it makes it so hard. It just kills the level designers on the project trying to get people up to high ground, because it takes a lot of space in order to do it.
Oh, yeah, that's actually a really interesting point that I guess I've never really kind of taken a kind of a notice of. Yeah, when you the stairs aren't very like these like long like windy climbs. Like there's kind of turns to get to that elevation, Is that just to keep everything smooth and just kind of movement predictable?
Yep. So that's part of it. So keep it smooth, keep movement predictable. It's also like it can be really like kind of difficult to overcome a really steep staircase. It's almost like a wall in front of you, and you don't know what's going to be at the top of it. And so we always like for players to be able to run through our maps and to be able to look at a space and kind of develop a mental 3D image of where everything's going, of what the space is actually going to be like outside of their view. And it's easier to do that with shallower stairs. It's also easier to push up a shallower staircase and a higher staircase. And like lastly, just the way that a lot of games character physics work, it's also smoother to move on steep staircases or on shallow staircases.
I was gonna say the only really, I guess, steep staircase I can think of is the one on like Horizon Lunar Colony, on the first point where you're kind of going up towards the balcony.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that does kind of prove like some of the things that you're talking about, where I know we've all been there where a Junkrat is sitting on top of the stairs with Horizon. You can't see where he's shooting you from, and you're just kind of getting pelted on the way up. It's not the best of feelings,
Yeah, I don't really know what to say about that besides we are moving away from 2CP.
Keep the combat moving. I love this area. Like you see where that soldier's sitting up top. Like one of the cool things about this map that I definitely saw when watching it was that like the attackers can actually like access that area. Like you can go around where you see
connected up there.
Curly mustache rotating around, and it's connected. That's something we haven't really seen in a lot of Overwatch maps.
Yeah, we try to. We're very intentional with the way we do flanking routes, and we try to make it so that at least one team, like the team, can be aware of people that are coming on a flank, and we usually don't try to let you get all the way around behind the defense without having some way of knowing that it's coming or having the offense earning something like that. Mm-hmm. And we think this one's fair. We've gone back and forth on this a lot. There's been 30 different variations of this route, but hopefully this one's fair.
Depending on how your game goes, it's fair or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Depending on who else is in the test. I actually have some questions from Twitter that some people have been pulling and just kind of just really I think things that people are interested in. For you guys, what change to character buff or nerf you guys most looking forward to that you guys have played around, implemented with thus far?
Wow, I mean it's a great question to ask yesterday, but I think now that we've gone over a lot of what we've been working on, there's so many changes to characters all across the board, including all the big changes to the tank role, the hero passives that we're introducing with all the other roles in the game. So as well as like some of the work that we've been doing with like CC abilities in the game. So it's really hard to pick one of those.
My personal one is actually the one that we saw from BlizzCon Line, was the Reinhardt stuff.
Yes,
as somebody who's always wanted to play Reinhardt, who's pretty tragic at it, being able to be a little bit more, this is like selfish, being able to be a little bit more brawly and more offensive is the type of Reinhardt play I want. When I just charge in without talking to any of my teammates currently, it doesn't work. I'm sure that
now you can do that.
I'm sure that won't work in Overwatch 2 either, but I can at least put it in my mind that it could be a possibility. Yeah.
That's always the promise of Reinhardt in any version of Overwatch that you're playing, is that moment where you get to drop the shield and go in and just start laying waste to people. Feels so good.
Yeah, it's you play Reinhardt and you come out and you feed a few times, you're like, maybe this isn't for me, and then you just land that one shatter, that perfect shatter, and then you're just like, yep, I'm committing. It's such a good ability. Here's another one from Twitter. How do you guys look at maintaining the balance between PvP and PvE? I assume they're kept like completely separate, like different environments. Like, But how do you guys look at that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because we talked a lot about that earlier when we started developing, much larger PvE games. We look at a hero like Winston. Winston is super fun in PvP, but a lot of his enjoyment comes from sort of how much you're willing to commit, and there's always like this risk game you're playing. And you're taking space, but are you don't want to be too far ahead of your team or your healers, and how you're committing and everything. But it's hard to translate that to a PvE environment, for example. So that in our early playtests of PvE, it was sort of like, it feels like it needs more, and then we started getting into like, okay, well, we really need to talk about if we're going to keep these separate, or are we just making changes to the base hero. So a lot of the, like for instance, the current Winston alternate fire he has, where he can shoot that blast, actually came from PvE first. We were just this is a lot more fun, and like, I wonder if this could apply to the base kit. Plus, we're doing all the other chains of PvP, and so we started playing with it in PvP. So in those cases, like if it feels like it works and we're like enjoying playing it, yeah, we'll totally take it. But I think our general philosophy is try to keep them separate, just so we can make sure that they shine really great in both individual game, or all the game modes really.
Yeah, and this might
I have to mention one thing really quick because it's kind of fun. I did early on. I just had to make this prototype, but I did a prototype of like a PvP VE mode. I called it, which was like a hybrid mode, because I think like I get the expectation that people will probably ask about that pretty quick if we want to do that, and so I was like, let's just try a mode of it. And it was a little dirty because it was like there wasn't a lot of balancing done. It was just like, let's just throw all the crazy PvE stuff in here and see how they work against players. And it was pretty tragic, but it was pretty interesting. And like, there's maybe a version of that. Yeah, exactly. There's maybe a version that we could do that at some point in the future, but we don't have like direct plans for that right now, because it was one thing came out of it like, this is fun, but like, man, this would be a lot of work trying to balance this anywhere close to what it would have to be.
Yeah, we do a lot of experimentation like that, which I think is one of the funnest parts about working on this game. And I know, like, as they were playing Rome, there was a question of like, hey, are we working on, like, do you work on other game modes? And it is something that we do a lot. Actually, the push map, or the push game mode, came out of a whole different game mode that we were working on, as we were kind of trying to solve how you would put a capture the flag into like a main version of Overwatch, and we weren't really able to do it, but push kind of came out of that. And we are working on one other one that I'm really excited about, and hopefully it's something that we'll be able to talk to our players in the community about later.
I love that.
Yes,
more ways to play is totally fine with me, and I'm sure the rest of the community. It's something that I've actually kind of like found throughout the day, and it's one of the things that's like a little bit newer to the lab game. It's like the experimental card, and then some of the things you're able to do there, and try out cool things that look like they've kind of made their way in. I feel like that has been a huge tool for you guys, for really just kind of testing out the April Fool stuff. Jeff, I don't know if I can convince you, but give me the Flying Sigma. I don't know how that works in a solo tank, but like, give me Flying Sigma so I can just battle Pharos and ignore my team. But a lot of some of that stuff is really interesting that you guys are able to try with the experimental.
Yeah, it's been so powerful. I mean, I feel like it's sort of a developer's dream in a sense to be like, because you're always just like, I don't know, maybe this is kind of cool. Could we just like show this to people and get their impressions? But like, we can't really do that. In fact, we've talked about in the past about expanding, maybe even showing more stuff, but like, what if we showed like crazy early level layouts that was just all like gray box stuff? Like, how early can we show before it gets like really ridiculous, where we're just like, here's a stick man with a gun? Like, is that just like not even worth giving feedback on, or what? But like, so it's been powerful, and we're still looking at ways to sort of use it, and it's just another great feedback tool to get from the community.
What's so funny, we were talking the other day, and it's like the April Fool's patch was ridiculous, but then when like you saw like some of the communities like, oh, this is kind of cool, and you're just like, wait, hold on, like we get Sigma's cool to fly for a day or two, but like we can't have that all the time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so we see the blue team kind of approach the final area, and then there was one question actually just about the Overwatch dev team. Like, how has it been? Working from home. How large has the team gotten over the last few years? I feel like it's really grown a lot.
the work from home is a bit of a mixed bag, you know. And when we first started, we were really worried about how productive the team would be, because it's never something it's something we haven't really done before. And the team is amazing, and they actually like really rallied, and I feel like we are just as productive as we were before, and in some ways we are more productive about certain things, you know. It's definitely, there's parts of it that are harder, you know, like we don't all have home offices, you know, like I just work in my bedroom, you know. I just have to make sure I make my bed every day before I go on calls. And then the team, it's really grown. We kind of like when we shipped Overwatch 1, when it launched, we were around 60 to 70 people, and the team has continued to grow from there. And I don't think we're at quite 200 yet, but we just keep growing, because the game that we're making now, Overwatch 2, it's a much bigger game than the original one.
It's even a bigger game than, like, even when I started to hear about Overwatch 2, it was like, oh, cool, like, yeah, like, this is gonna, I want another Overwatch. And then, like, just kind of hearing everything that goes involved with it, with, like, the PvE, and, you know, now all these massive changes to PvP, like, the scope of the game is so big.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. But it's really exciting working on something that has that many aspects to it. And the thing that I like about it, and hopefully what we're showing here today, is that we're able to work on something that's new, you know, and it has all these exciting elements, while still focusing on what, like, made the original game great. Like, we are like, hey, love or hate 5v5, we are committed to like keeping the PvP of Overwatch as competitive as possible, and we are putting so many resources into it.
Yeah, just pushing the game forward. It's like all the heroes that you love from Overwatch 1, with the learnings from Overwatch 1, just evolutionize, right? You know, pushing the game forward, you know, coming up with new kind of creative ways to play. So this Transcendence base sealed the deal here.
Yes.
Reaper did his dance on the cart, and he was gone.